Oh, yes. There we are. We're on. Sarah Fay, thank you so much for joining me and for agreeing to talk about this amazing book. Oh, and for bringing your friend,
I
your
know.
little
Always we're
friend.
going to have an appearance. Hi, everybody. Come on in. Great to see you.
Hey.
You get to meet my cat. This is Sweet. Sweet is not in pathological, but he should be. He's the thing that
Yes.
actually got me well from mental illness is this baby. So yeah.
Aw.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining me on this. This was such an influential book for me on so many levels. And there were three themes that I definitely wanted to highlight. And maybe there's some more that you have as well. But basically, I'm sure everyone here knows who Sarah Fay is. She's a celebrated writing professor at Northwestern and the author of the book Pathological, which was an amazing read for so many reasons. And so, one of those reasons is that it highlights the brokenness of our mental health care system, which is a theme that I would love to hear you speak a little bit more about. The second reason I thought it was so important was the brilliant way you wove in your current life path of becoming a writing teacher and using the punctuation as like the structure for the chapters. I loved that. It was so brilliant. And yeah, and then just, basically teaching, using it as sort of a way of weaving in, teaching about punctuation. I learned about commas. Who knew? So, yeah, so I guess if you could just start by, what's your story? How did it come to this book?
Yeah, definitely. So just in case, I think probably some people don't, let me just make sure I'm doing this right. Okay.
Mhm.
Here is, in case anyone's interested, this is a way to get to pathological. So just for those who haven't read it, which I'm sure might be most of you, it is it's a memoir of the 25 years I spent living with mental health, with mental illness, serious mental illness, and in the mental health system. So it started when I was 12 and I was diagnosed with anorexia. And then it's called Pathological, the true story of six misdiagnoses, because I then overall received six diagnoses over the course of my life. So at 12, I was told I had anorexia. And then in my 20s, they said, no, 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 actually, it's generalized anxiety disorder. And then they said, no, it's actually major depressive disorder. And then they said, no, it's actually OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Then they said, no, it's actually ADHD. And then they said, no, actually, it's bipolar. And I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 and then bipolar 1. So I went through this series of diagnoses, which I know probably some of you on this call have experienced as well, at least one or probably more. And so I never thought to stop and question why I was getting different diagnoses. It didn't. I mean, yeah, physical medicine gets things wrong, but it didn't really occur to me why these diagnoses. And I just thought they were medically proven. I thought they were scientifically proven. I pictured blood tests and men in white coats, and I really, obviously, I struggled. A lot of people talk about how successful I am, or I was given that. And the reality is, yes, I have been very successful. So I got a PhD. I wrote for the New York Times, but those professions are very, very forgiving in terms of time. Like if I had to work at McDonald's, I would have been fired and I would probably be living on the street. So I was very, very fortunate and very privileged to be able to have those professions where I could excel, but they were like, I was teaching twice a week. Like, that's really, I can muscle through for 3 hours. But people who have it, someone else, if I had been in the position that a lot of people are in, I would have never, I don't know if I'd be alive, to be honest. So that's just to sort of give credit where it's due with other people and how hard this is to work through. I ended up chronically suicidal, and in my 40s, I could not live independently. And
Mm.
so I was, extremely ill. And being chronically suicidal is as anyone who's loved someone who's struggled with suicidality or been suicidal, it is just an excruciating way to live. So all of those things happened. And when I was at my worst, I had a psychiatrist who was also my therapist. ill-advised.
Mm.
Do not do that because you don't have anyone to talk to about your psychologist and you don't have anyone to talk to about your psychiatrist. So you don't
Yeah.
have like someone to bounce it off of. Anyway, I was trying to end our working relationship and I wanted him to continue to be my psychiatrist, but not my psychologist or my therapist. And he said no. And then he stopped. He would not renew my medication. So I was almost out of medications. And I was in a crisis. I was still suicidal. And my sister sort of swept in and found this new psychiatrist. He's my psychiatrist today. And I went to see him. We had the 30-minute consultation. And I waited for him to, I mean, those of you who have ever been to a psychiatrist know you have this little intake, it's 30 minutes, and then they proclaim what's wrong with you. So I waited for him to tell me that I either was still had bipolar 1 disorder or I actually had a different diagnosis. And he looked at me and he said, I don't know what you have. And I was like, "What? How can you say that?" And it just like the world exploded. And so I walked out of the office. This was in Chicago and it was a bitterly cold day and like the sky looked different and the trees looked different and everything was harsher and crisper but clearer. And I thought, "No one knows what I have." And then I started to investigate psychiatric diagnoses and where they come from and finally landing on the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And this is all a very long way of saying that this is the the three strands in the book are my story. So of the 25 years I spent in the mental health system struggling with serious mental illness. Then there's a strand that is the history of the DSM. So the history of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which came to us in 1952. And we had 108 diagnoses. It was just created by a room of a handful of white men, heterosexual men, made up sort of these diagnoses. Now, when I say made up, I just mean that they put a name to our emotional and mental distress. I'm in no way saying that mental illness is not real because I suffered from it greatly. It is. But basically, what's happened is we all as humans experience mental and emotional distress. And the American mental health system, well, I shouldn't say just, well, it is just American. We're really the people who use the DSM, but the DSM has put diagnoses to it and symptom lists. So that is new. That was not something we ever did, but it had 108 diagnoses. We now have over 550 diagnoses. How is that possible? Right? Like,
Many
yeah,
many of which are created based on new cultural phenomena, such as
exactly.
gaming and porn and,
Yep.
those kinds of things that come about in our modern culture.
Exactly. And a great example of how flawed I learned. So my psychiatrist then said, like, I don't know what you have. I started to research the DSM. And what I learned was so this diagnosis I've been given of major depressive disorder, for instance. If we open the DSM today, it says major depressive disorder, and then there's a list of symptoms. And basically, for major depressive disorder, you have to have 5 of 9 of the symptoms listed, right? Like sleeps too much, doesn't sleep enough, eats too much, doesn't eat enough. I mean, you could not land on the, like, not fall into
Mhm,
this, but
mhm.
regardless of that, Robert Spitzer, who is the architect of the DSM, he said that he was asked, why do you need 5 of 9? Like, what was it about the 5 of the 9 that really meant you had major depressive disorder? And he said, we just went around the table and 4 seemed like too few and 6 seemed like too many. That is the diagnostic like standard we're working with today.
Right.
So that became like an obsession of mine. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, okay, having lived through that, and I'm so sorry you had to live through that,
Oh, thank you.
and I'm so grateful to you for speaking up about it, and I guess, what do you want people to take away? How do you, hope that your experience can help people?
Well, when the book came out, it came out in 22, so 2022, and it did really well when it came out, but it was the height of the pandemic. And pretty much the media was saying, go get a diagnosis, get your children a diagnosis. Like diagnoses were everything. And partly it was because people were anxious and depressed, which is, by the way, a perfectly normal reaction to a global pandemic.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that in our society in the US, you have to have a diagnosis in order to have it covered by insurance. It is a very flawed system. So I'm in no way, and my psychiatrist, the one who said, I don't know what you have, doesn't take insurance. So he has the luxury of being able to do that. And we've talked about it a lot. And I
Mhm.
have the luxury that I could afford that psychiatrist. Most people cannot, or
Mm.
not most people, but I certainly couldn't. Someone help me, but at the time I was not making enough to otherwise afford him. But so thinking about that, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought. We were talking
Uh,
about,
well, how
oh,
I was
what
asking how it
takeaway?
could help people. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So from the book, when it came out, it was the height of the pandemic. And so what was interesting is I came out from HarperCollins and we were really prepared for pushback from psychiatry, of course, right? They were going to be
Mhm.
really mad that I had said this. None, zero, zero pushback from psychiatry. And I have to say that every mental health professional I spoke to, who, by the way, are amazing people. I'm in no way anti psychiatry. I am anti that one psychiatrist, but I am not anti psychiatry. I think that we are asking them to do a tall order. All mental health
Yeah.
professionals were like, here, solve my mental and emotional pain, go. That's
Yeah.
just not fair.
Right.
And but so thinking about, oh my gosh, I don't know why I'm losing my train of thought. It's because I've gone from like one meeting to the next meeting to the next meeting today.
Yeah.
Uh,
You're busy.
but taking away and that, and why did I get to this? I cannot remember.
The pushback from this
Oh,
psychiatric
psychiatry.
community. Uh-huh.
I'm so sorry. It's just been one of those days. So pushback from psychiatry, but where we got pushback from was the public.
Oh,
People did not want their diagnoses threatened. They did not want to
yeah.
question them. They did not want, and a lot of people identified with them, which I had. So when you
Mm.
ask, what do I want people to take from the book? It is that. It's that it's not that diagnoses are bad. It's not that we should throw the DSM out the window. I don't have a system to replace it. If I did, I would offer it, but I don't. I'm not
Mm.
even anti DSM, really. I mean, I am, I guess, to some degree, the way that it's being used right now. But what I want someone to take is that the point of it is they were misdiagnoses because they could only approximate what was happening with me. So, for instance, when I was diagnosed as anorexic, I was 12 years old. My parents were divorcing and I was going to a new high school. I couldn't eat.
Mhm.
I couldn't eat.
Mhm.
Like that, I was scared and I was sad. That's
Mhm.
still how I manifest sadness and fear is like, I don't
Mhm.
want to eat.
Yeah.
And so again, there were just very good reasons for why I was feeling the way I was feeling. But I became an anorexic. Why? Because the doctor actually looked at me and said, you are an anorexic. Not I have anorexia. It's like saying you are cancer. So
Yes.
I took on the identity of these diagnoses. I could find them in myself. It's very hard not to find many of these diagnoses in ourselves. It was like, yes, I'm scattered. Yes, I have a short attention span. Yes, I'm compulsive. And it was the most superficial level of the really distressing in some ways elements of these. And sometimes they were really genuinely distressing. I mean,
Mhm.
since antiquity, we have lived with psychosis, mania, depression, and anxiety since antiquity. Those are real human things that happen.
Mhm.
And in some ways, I don't want they're normal until you are no longer able to live, to function.
Mhm.
And then it's a problem, like period. That's just true. But all these other things and the way that they are culturally represented, I became them. And what I want people to take is we're kind of becoming these diagnoses, and maybe that's helpful, and if so, that is great. Like if you look at the autism community, they're amazing. They have made this diagnosis be something that they really connect through. They have a very strong community. They advocate for their rights. That is fantastic. Depression, not so much. Bipolar and mania, not at all. Like, that is not, it's not cool to be any of those things. I mean,
Yeah.
so again, thinking about, you know, really looking at whether or not the diagnosis and you inhabiting it is limiting you, then that's what I want to shine a light
Right. Yeah, and I'm reminded of
on. Sorry. Yeah.
sorry.
I said
No,
that was a very long answer.
it's
Thanks,
good. I mean,
everybody.
it's great just to have you talk about it because, if people haven't read the book, I mean, it really is an important book. And what it reminds me of is, you said since antiquity, people have dealt with these issues. And in antiquity and still in modern day, a lot of times these are interpreted in certain cultures as spiritual crises.
Yeah,
And they're not necessarily, you know, uh, what's that word? Pathologize. What's the word?
exactly. That's why it's called pathological.
Yeah, and, they are, taken as instead as invitations and doorways and portals that, in the proper community, in the proper setting, and with the proper perspective can be openings.
Yep.
And what I love about what you just said is that it's so important, and what I think we completely miss in this culture is that we are not our emotions.
Yeah.
We are, humans having an experience here. Every moment is a new experience, and if you fixate on a diagnosis, you cut off that flow of experience, and I think that's what was so powerful, for you to that you shared in that book. So yeah, and I have not gotten to your next book, but I
Yeah,
see
I
that
was
you
gonna
have
say.
another one. Yeah, so tell us, can you give us a, preview of that?
Well, yeah, so it's not even you can actually read it. So what happened was I just wanna mention one thing going back to psychiatry and the way that my book was received, that Pathological was received. I was
Mhm.
actually interviewed on NPR, and I was interviewed with Tom Insel, who is head of the National Institute for Mental Health for 13 years, and he
Mm.
really pushed the biomedical model. We are going to find the gene that causes mental illness. We're going to find the thing biologically in the CAT scans and all the things. And then the other guest was Paul Applebaum, who is head of the DSM steering committee. So you would think these two people. Now, Tom Insel, and this is what, and there's also a man named Alan Francis who helped create the ADHD diagnosis and then also the new autism diagnosis and the DSM 4. Both of them have done these amazing about faces. And uh,
Wow.
Alan Francis, I'm forgetting the name of his book, but it's something normal. It's not questioning normal. But anyway, it's a great book. But he says, like, look, I wrote the DSM and I created these diagnoses. Like, they're wrong. And it's
Wow.
amazing. And then Tom Insel had tells this amazing story about how he was giving a talk to parents and he had all the slides and the brain images and he was telling them about schizophrenia and we're going to find this thing and that thing and this is and one of the parents, a father, raised his hand and stood up afterward and said to Tom Insel, look, my son is living on the street. He has been living there for 10 years or whatever it is, or 5 years. He won't speak to us. You are talking to me about the composition of paint and my house is burning. Like, what are you doing for me? And he said it just changed. It gives me goosebumps because he said it just changed his life. And he wrote
Mhm.
a great book from called Healing, Our Path to Healing, in which he says basically, like, I was wrong. Basically, I spent $20 million on a bunch of cool studies, and we're never going to find we're never going to find one thing that causes mental illness. This is just to say, then we were on NPR and Paul Applebaum was a little more defensive, like he was defending the DSM, of course, he's head of the steering committee. And as I was talking, my main thing was there's nothing wrong with the DSM. It's that it's being presented as scientifically valid when it's not. No one told me, oh, hey, here's this diagnosis. And these are pretty flawed. And we don't know a lot about the brain, but I'm going to use this diagnosis for you for this reason. And I'm recommending this medication. I'm completely pro medication if it helps anybody.
Mhm.
And this is why. What do you think? Now, I know that it can't always have the what do you think conversation, especially when I was in crisis, but
Mhm.
that alone would have changed things for me. Or if I had known where my diagnoses were coming from. And so I basically just said on NPR, the public needs to know and has the right to know. And Paul Applebaum said, you're right. You're right. And
How
so
did that feel?
I was like, it's funny because we weren't on camera and I like fist pumped the air. I was like, in my
All
office.
right, you're on camera now.
It was so funny. It was like such a gift not to be like, now I'm gonna
Awesome.
be on camera. But anyway,
Mhm,
like just it was amazing. And then whereas at the same time, my publicist, both publicists that I had on the book said, I don't believe what you're saying. Like I don't agree. And I want to keep my diagnosis. And I don't like that you're questioning it, which
mhm,
probably was a big red flag for those to work with those as publicists. But no. But so anyway, it was just really interesting where the backlash was coming from.
mhm,
Then flash forward and it was 20 I wrote so I ended up healing from mental illness, and when I was doing publicity for Pathological, I had healed. I
mhm,
didn't know that was even possible. Like no one told me. I never got the memo that you can heal from mental illness, especially
mhm,
serious mental illness. But that same psychiatrist we were in a session and apropos of nothing, he told me this story about a client of his who had healed and gone off for medication. You do not have to go off medication. So I'm in no way
right.
saying that. I am not off medication because my body is dependent on it. I was on it for so long, but I am at like a neutral point and this is my
Mhm,
normal. So please don't take that as this. But this woman had, and she was now an executive at Google. And I was like, okay, you do
mhm,
not heal from mental illness and you do not become an executive at Google. Like that is just never going to happen. And
right.
so then my image of healing and health, mental health, was Google executives, which by the way is not has not helped. But I was like, I
Mhm,
want to be Google executive well, is what I talk about. But anyway, then I part of it was I had been freed from my diagnosis. So I still did
mhm,
not know what diagnosis. Now my psychiatrist has a diagnosis for me. I will not learn. He will never tell me. He's asked me, "Do you want to know?" And I said no because I'll become it.
good for
Probably
you.
at one now, but we still need. So it's still on there. He is now since I'm now officially recovered. Like I got
Mhm,
feel now. I still see him because I see a GP every year too. So
mhm,
why not see a psychiatrist? I have a
right.
history of mental health issues. Like, of course, I'm going to check in.
Yeah,
So I think other people and my mother passed away. I have support. I don't see a therapist, but I see a life coach. I just went for EMDR therapy because I found my
mm,
mother's body and there was trauma there. So
mhm,
again, it's like there are people think you're going to become well. Like I no longer have a diagnosis. I'm no longer, I no longer have mental illness. Like my life looks so particular. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I barely leave
mhm,
the house.
mhm,
I like meticulously exercise. I get perfect sleep. I love my cats. I have family. I
mhm.
see a life coach. I have a EMDR. Like I have a lot of support. And so I
Yeah,
think people think you heal and then you like leave the mental health system, but you don't need to do that, is what I'm trying to say. Anyway,
yeah,
you told me this story and so I kind of started working on healing. And once that became a goal, I didn't even know what it looked like. But then I started researching it for my next book. I knew I wanted that to be my next book. And I called it Cured, just kind of tongue in cheek in some ways, because of course there's no one cure, but curing actually means to take care of.
yeah,
And so I like that idea that curing, I feel like my mental health now is this constant maintenance project and
yeah,
it's constant care. And I love that, but it's a lot of work to stay mentally healthy in what is a society that is not designed for us in any way.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
anyway, I wrote Cured. HarperCollins passed on it and they ended up partly because they felt like, look, we didn't really. I mean, I sold a ton of copies of Pathological, and then I relaunched it this summer, and it ended up on the USA Today bestseller list, which is amazing. So all that is great. It did great, but anyway, they didn't feel like they could sell it, which is just fine. And I ended up, and I'll just put this is my author Substack. I ended up serializing it on Substack, which
yeah,
kind of a cool thing that we can do on Substack if anyone's interested. I also have written a lot about it, and these are all free. And Cured is open to everyone right now too for free if you're interested in reading about it, about my recovery. And so anyway, I guess long story short, it was a long process, and I write about also the history of the recovery movement. So in all my memoirs, I don't want to only talk about myself. So in Pathological, it was me braided in with the history of the DSM. Cured is me braided in with the history of the recovery movement. So it
Mm,
seems that we've been recovering from mental illness since the 16th century. And I was like, I
mm,
wish someone had told me. Like, that would have been
right.
nice. So I talk about that and just the 19th century asylums and how recovery and mental illness has been portrayed and thought of over the years. And that was so illuminating. So, in some ways, research is a power to me. It's like a
Yeah,
medicine. And once I learn something and I know the truth about something, I can move to a new place in my life. And so,
yeah.
once I did that, it was so clear that I had recovered. I mean, I live in a different brain now. And I was at lunch with my dad, and he and I had been estranged for many years. And once I started to get well, we became closer and we started having lunch every Friday. And one day I looked at him and I was like, Dad, and I hadn't told anybody because I was afraid someone would tell me you can't do that. You can't heal. And I said, Dad, I think I'm recovered. I think I'm better. I think I'm like healed. And he looked at me and he said, I know, Sarah. I know you are. And it like makes me cry. It's the best day of my life. Absolutely. Like,
Awesome.
recovering is the best thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, awesome. What courage. I mean, seriously, what courage that led you to stick with that whole journey and just the setbacks, from that you write about in that first book. The just the courage shines through. So I so appreciate you for writing that. I also just a lot of people probably know you here from the
Yeah.
Substack Writers at Work community, but also, yeah, check out Sarah's other Substack where she goes into this. Great resource for therapists if you want
Yeah.
alternative perspectives and anyone that wants insights into healing mental illness, but also just becoming well mentally, which is always, it's always a spectrum and
Uh,
it's a daily process, especially in this day and age.
yeah. I mean, one thing that was very helpful, I would say was almost the turning point for me was evolutionary psychiatry. It
Mm,
just changed my life and understanding that my brain is designed to keep me alive, not make me happy. It's like,
mhm,
oh, and that we are living in this world that does not match what our brains are designed to do, which is to look for danger everywhere.
right.
And I didn't understand that when my brain gets anxious, it's actually a normal response to this crazy environment that we live in. And that doesn't make it any easier and it doesn't make it any better. And I do hope that, you know, that people on this call, like, just know that if you're going through this, I so am with you. And that I feel like, mental health, especially in our culture and in this age, and when we're looking at screens and staring at phones and these things that are really not what our brains were designed to interact with. Like, it
Mhm,
thinks I'm being chased by a lion on the veldt and I'm just answering email. Like, that's all. But
right.
this is all to say, people who are listening, if you're going through this, I still have panic attacks. I still get anxious. I still
Mhm,
feel depression. All those things are part of the human experience. And
mhm,
I'm not dysfunctional. So again, like, just know, like, m- everything at your disposal, use it if it's helpful. That's kind of how I.
mhm. Yeah.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much for
much.
having me. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that was a lot. I just rattled.
That was great. Yeah, it's great. Great to hear the backstory and to know that, you've come full circle. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly, even just having been with you in your group now for,
Yes.
well, not even 6 months, and it's just, like, amazing to watch you. It's like, "You go."
And it's funny, I think people do know me from Substack Writers at Work, and I do wanna share this and just one thing about the punctuation because we can circle
Oh, yeah.
back to that.
Uh-huh.
But with Substack Writers at Work, I really kept my author Substack and Substack Writers at Work separate for
Mhm.
many reasons. I still want it separate because I wanted that to be a space for all of you, and it's really my teaching. But I was ashamed. I didn't want anyone to know about
Mhm.
my mental illness. I worried, like,
Mhm.
are they gonna treat me differently? I didn't want at the university at Northwestern, I didn't want my students to know. And
Mhm.
when I went to publish the book, my family was very much against it. They said, "It's gonna ruin your life. Do not do this." Once it was picked up by HarperCollins and everybody and it was did so well that now they love it. They, like, recommend it to friends.
Mhm.
But it was not always like this.
Yeah.
And so just, Oh my gosh, now I've lost my train of thought again. We'll go to punctuation.
Commas.
Commas, just come back to commas whenever you and then when in doubt, go to commas. So, there's a 3rd strand in pathological. I didn't have it in cured. But the 3rd strand in pathological is a love letter to punctuation. And my agent who ended up representing me, when I sent it out, I sent it to 7 of the biggest agents. And I had interest from a couple, but when I lived in New York City and I was a 20-year-old writer, I used to dream and daydream on the subway of an agent calling me and saying to me, "I love your book. I'm halfway through. Don't sign with anyone else." I didn't have a book. Okay, when I was 20 or 30, I just wanted the getting the agent and published thing. Flash forward, this was my first book. I had sent it to these agents, and it's a Sunday, and it's very cloudy. I just remember it was like cold and cloudy in March, and I get an email, and it says, "Sarah, I'm 2/3 of the way through your book. I love it. Don't talk to anyone else. I'm CCing my assistant on the call." And I was like, "Thanks, universe. Like it only took you 30 years, but I appreciate it." So anyway, but she was the only one who didn't want me to cut the punctuation.
Oh,
And she's the reason, I mean, I immediately signed with her because the punctuation is weird. Even the New York Times review basically said at the end, and then there's this weird part about punctuation. But the way I use it is that punctuation is a way that we order language. It's the way that we
yeah.
order our communication to communicate better. And the
Mhm,
DSM, those symptoms and those diagnoses are just a way to try to order our mental and emotional lives. They're
mhm.
just not very good at it. That's pretty much
Right.
yeah, that's it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so you actually found your own way to order your experience.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And so in there, I give all these lessons on there are 13 chapters and 13 punctuation marks. So each chapter has a punctuation mark.
yeah, fantastic, and so back to the forgotten thought, it was your family was upset that you were gonna
Oh, that
share
I
it. Mhm.
published it?
Yeah,
Um,
and then did that come back to you?
I can't remember.
No, okay.
Where I was going with that. Now they're fine with it. Um, yeah, I can't remember where I was going with that.
Oh, well. But, interestingly, what you just shared about your Subway fantasy, it
Yes.
goes back to the first, live I just did, a week ago with, Magdalena Ponerska, who
Oh, yeah.
teaches the future scripting. That's
Yep.
exactly what she teaches. So
Oh,
there you go.
wow.
Yeah, here's our
Perfect.
first, real life example of that. So,
Yeah. And
yeah,
I
so
think,
check that out.
like, with that, I just didn't ever look to my future. I didn't
Mhm,
ever, I didn't have a future when I lived in those diagnoses. Oh, the one thing
mhm,
I was going to say, this is not about the family thing, but the um the other this was one thing I never came back to, which is the reason why I relaunched Pathological this year is
mm,
because things have changed so much with diagnoses.
mhm,
And you see on Instagram and primarily Instagram, young people self-diagnosing and we diagnose each other and they kind of do this performative thing and asymptomatic and all of this. When that started to happen, and then there's a show called The English Teacher. It was a bit controversial because of something that the lead actor did. But anyway, they
mhm.
had an episode that made fun of that. And I thought, whoa, if we have come that full circle, we are in, this is a different world. And when we
New
relaunched it,
Yorker.
it was absolutely true because we got no
Yeah,
pushback from the public when we did it again. So
interesting.
people are tired
Well,
of this. Yeah.
fantastic. So you've started a movement,
Yes, I
perhaps.
hope so.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you
Well,
so much for having me.
yeah, well, thank you, and I see some comments in here appreciating you,
Thank
and
you.
your book and your writing and, yeah, everything that you're sharing here, so
I love this. Thank you so much, everybody. All right.
thank you, Sarah. Great. Take
Bye.
care.
Thank you, Kim.
Alright, bye-bye.